G'day from me, John Denton, and welcome to another episode in the Business Ready for Sale podcast series. This episode needs little introduction. It's a follow-up interview with business valuer Chris Milne. The first interview with Chris was back when we were in lockdown for COVID-19, and it was about how the virus and the lockdown and the pandemic were going to affect business values, business valuation methods, and business sales. After that interview, we agreed to get together again 3 or 4 months down the track and see what had happened and what Chris's thoughts had come true, but just to see what had happened with more time having passed. So this is a really interesting follow-up interview where we find that business values, some have actually gone up, some have gone down, but there was still good demand. Finance was still pretty hard to get, and vendor finance was becoming more of a thing. But let's hear the interview between myself and Chris, where we cover all those topics and more. Welcome everybody, it's John Denton here, DNA of Business, with an interview with Chris Milne. And by way of introduction, Chris is a business valuer in Perth, Western Australia. Been a business valuer for over 25 years, I believe. Doesn't look that old, but been a valuer.
I've got good lighting on, John. That's why. And I've just had a haircut as well.
Oh, very good. I need to get a new makeup artist on my end. But yeah, we had a chat back in April the 9th it was, which was about 3 or 4 weeks into this whole COVID-19 thing. And the reason for the chat at the time was to talk about what we thought was going to happen with business values as a result of the virus and the shutdowns and all the things that were going on. So it's been interesting looking back over that, and we're now almost 4 months into this. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to have a chat with Chris again and just get an update. Chris publishes a newsletter quarterly called Business Values Newsletter, which is a fantastic document that most business brokers in town and I think around Australia refer to. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. So, Chris, one of the things we talked about, or one of the things you brought up last time, was a thing called AV, after virus. I'm not sure that there's going to be an AV now.
We certainly don't know when it's going to be. That's one thing about it. But yeah, look, it's interesting. And by the way, this is stuff that when I'm talking about business values in the market and all that sort of thing, a lot of my role, I'm a compiler of information, so I don't make the information up. It actually all comes from a fraternity of business brokers out there. And for instance, I've just prior to this podcast been in a virtual workshop with 80 business brokers from the Australian Institute of Business Brokers, and so and what that means is that I'm getting input on the market from all around Australia. And including Western Australia, to see what's going on. So, we can theorise about things, but it's really good to get that grassroots input from the people out in the marketplace. So that was something which I'll impart some of that today.
Okay, fantastic. So, what are you seeing generally as far as business sales and sellers and buyers? When we talked 4 months ago, buyers were pulling out of the market, sellers were taking their businesses off the market. What sort of happened over that period of time? Is it the same?
No, not at all. No, it's been, except for Victoria, which obviously for obvious reasons is still, but in terms of just Western Australia, the vast majority of buyers have returned to the marketplace. The majority of those deals that fell over just prior to settlement when COVID hit have all been resurrected, and people have proceeded with those deals. So the market, the business sales market has really recovered quite well, although it is segmented in terms of where the strength lies, and the businesses that are selling well. It's very different to a market where there's some that just aren't selling well and are becoming more difficult to sell. So that's sort of state of play.
Okay. So, and what about the prices? Have they sort of dropped, or I guess it's difficult to say. We'll talk a bit later, more detail about valuations, but generally speaking,
I don't think the prices have dropped. I think there's a quality aspect. So quality businesses, if anything, may even have stronger prices. But businesses with any weakness are getting even weaker prices, if that makes sense. So there's actually a lack of quality businesses for sale in the marketplace compared to what there was prior to COVID. I think around Australia, including WA, the number of listings in the marketplace has reduced by between 15 and 20%. So less businesses on the market. Buyer demand at least as good now as it was before COVID. So interesting times ahead.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting one. And with the economy as well, I know in your newsletter, your latest version, you talked about the state of the Australian economy, and 4 months ago we talked about going into recession. What's your take on that now?
Well, I think at the moment we're in kind of what I call fake recession. We're not in real recession yet because we're being held up by JobKeeper and Cash Boost, and so it's kind of like the reality of the recession hasn't hit, even though technically the recession has hit. The real rate of unemployment is probably over 10%, but that's just not being felt. It's even, you even look at things like, when we look at what we talked about last time, we were trying to predict what businesses are going to go better and what ones are not going to do so well. One of the businesses that, the business types that is doing better in the last couple of months that I didn't predict is actually the discretionary spend retail. And that's been because, A, we've got JobKeeper, but B, because people haven't been able to travel overseas, and people have been locked in shutdown, and so all of a sudden they've come out, and I think it's all been about a bit of sort of retail therapy, whether it be, domestic tourism. We were down in Dunsborough a couple of weeks ago for a bit of a holiday, and people were out and about. People were spending money. Retail businesses were doing well. Hospitality in some parts was doing okay, where there's not a big crowd sort of distancing issue. But I think that's a sugar hit. I think that you're coming out of lockdown. JobKeeper's still there. You're not traveling overseas, and so you're spending a bit more money on most things, including discretionary retail. But there's some sugar hit about that, and I think some short-termness about that.
Yes, it's going to be interesting to see when JobKeeper comes off or reduces, and well, if the borders open up as well, I mean, opens up a whole new world.
No, that's right. That's right. Yeah, it's and that's why we talk about domestic tourism. Well, that's a bit segmented too, because the sort of West Australian holiday where you can drive there and where it's intrastate stuff, that's all going well. But if your business has relied mainly on international or interstate tourists, those businesses are still obviously suffering a bit.
Yeah. I don't know, I've got a client on Rottnest Island, and that's been an interesting time as well, having been closed down because of it became a quarantine spot. And then just when they thought they were going to stay closed down till September, it all opened up again. But they can be closed down at 48 hours notice.
Yeah, but it's interesting when I talk about, business values. Good businesses are probably, if anything, getting stronger multiples, maybe the same or stronger, and maybe those weaker businesses getting even worse. There's a lot in the market now about some form of vendor terms being required. So once again, just speaking to the 80 brokers online and listening to what they've got to say, the percentage of their deals where the vendors are required to just maybe in a lot of cases in small business, it's just a simple retention. So you pay 70 or 80% on settlement, and then 20 or 30% after a year once the turnover's proved up, and that's really a mechanism to protect the buyer and get the seller to share the risk about, well, you're telling me that once COVID's over, the trade's going to normalise, but I'm not 100%. I'm not as confident as what you are, and so yep, I'm prepared to go through with a deal, but guess what? You're going to share a bit of that risk with me. And so the simple retention deal for smaller businesses, and then sort of a more complicated maybe earn out deal for larger businesses, far greater percentage of those deals happening in the marketplace now.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the finance broking and the banks, are you seeing how is lending happening? I know in the past, since the Royal Commission, it's been pretty difficult to get a loan. Has that changed?
No, it's still very difficult. And a lot of the brokers will tell you that their belief is that the biggest impact, negative impact on business values in the last 2 years has actually been access to finance. So it's literally access to finance, and it's a really interesting scenario. And what it does present for buyers, though, is it presents, if you've got your finance in hand, you're going to get a really, really good deal, because the multiples you're able to buy businesses for now, compared to interest rates and the cost of servicing your loan, is the best position you've probably been in for many, many years. So finance, if you can control your own finance, you're in a very, very good position to buy. And once again, from a vendor's position, if you have to help that finance situation by offering some vendor terms, then you're going to get a full value for your business. It's an interesting question, I think, John, that the market value of a business is maybe now not based on 100% of payment at settlement, because typical market terms are now going to be some sort of retention going forward, I think is the state of play.
Yeah. I remember 12 months or more ago when we had a coffee there, you were talking about seeing more vendor finance and people buying into businesses.
Yeah. I think there was, at that point in time, it was logical that was going to happen. It was starting to happen a little bit. But I think now, but brokers, weren't particularly keen to do that unless they had to. Now they have to. So they're saying, well, my buyer's not going to buy this business unless some of that sort of that safety of a vendor terms or retention is offered. And so now they're becoming more regular now because of that setup.
Well, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I've put people off with vendor finance in the past, but as you say, I think now we're getting to the point where there's no choice really. It'll be interesting. The other thing I've noticed with my clients in my mentoring groups, who are all business owners, and talking to them recently, we had a meeting and I did a show of hands and said, who's had a better year this financial year than last financial year? And most of the hands went up by one or two. But the other thing that I've seen is that a few of them their businesses went through a dive in March, April, particularly, when we were all put into a state of fear by the government and don't go out and wash your hands every 5 minutes and all these sort of
Sure.
things
Yeah.
that we had to do. Um, a lot of businesses seemed to take a hit then, but then in May, June, they've come back, and a couple of them had really good May and June months, which put them then over for the financial year. So when it comes to doing a valuation on a business, you know, how are those things? How would you recommend those things be taken into account?
Yeah, well, and you make a really good point, John. And my experience too, in just doing valuations, is probably seemingly in Western Australia anyway, there's more businesses that their financials might have had some sort of benefit towards the end. Yes, they lost a month there in the middle, where, everyone just didn't know what was going on, and we all sort of put the shutters up. Um, but then there's just been this sugar hit thing, and if you're listening to the brokers today, they're also saying a lot of that's continued into July. So making adjustments in valuations is not just adjusting for the negative impacts of COVID. It's actually also adjusting for the positive sugar hit type impacts. We talked about people just wanting some retail therapy at the moment, so they're getting out there and spending, but it won't last. And the long-term effect of the recession, when the JobKeeper is rescinded and so forth, will that'll be when we see what the long-term effect is. So what we've got to do in the meantime is we have to basically extricate the positive or negative effects of COVID. And what that means typically for most businesses is that only using the first 8 or 9 months of accounts for the 2019-20 year, because the last 3 months were affected. The last 3 or 4 months were affected. So what I've been doing in practice when I'm doing my valuations is actually getting the business owners or their accountant to give me, yes, the full year accounts, but also the accounts just up till the end of February, and preferably with last year's profit and loss alongside, so you can see where the business sits towards compared to the previous year, so 2018-19. If the 2018-19 year and 2019-20 year up to the end of February were looking similar, then you're almost probably better to use the full year 2018-19 as the best estimate of the current profit for the business, rather than trying to dive in and work out all the ups and downs to do with COVID, JobKeeper, cash boost, rental subsidies, loss in trade, gain in trade, that were all extraordinary. Rather than trying to work that out and try to present that story to a purchaser, I've looked at this whole cocktail of things and I reckon you draw a line like this. Well, the purchaser is going to say, well, I'm not that confident about that, but if it was trading the same up to the end of February as it was in the last year, then I'm probably going to be willing to accept that your normal trade is going to be similar to 2018-19.
That's an interesting one. The question then for the buyer would have, I guess, is, and when's it going to get back to normal? Because...
Yeah, well, that's right. And if you, what's in the practical marketplace, sometimes if the business has been shut down, sometimes the terms of the contract is that they're not going to take possession of that business or settle on that business until after shutdown's over, and so that fixes part of the problem. But once again, this is where this whole sort of retention type deal comes in, because the buyer is going to want to see, well, I'm willing to pay you based on the normal value of the business, if you want to call it that, but let's wait and see what the new normal is. So I'll pay you this much up front, and then I'll pay you the rest once we confirm it's back to normal.
Yeah, whatever normal is.
That's right, the new normal.
The new normal, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. That a thought came to mind then about commercial real estate and office space. I mean, do you see what's happening in that area? I mean, now with people, I've been reading media articles about how employees aren't wanting to go back into the office. They're more comfortable working from home, and in some cases, they're more productive.
Well, 100%. I think that the new normal is going to be more working from home, more online retail. Um, higher vacancy rates in commercial office space, higher vacancy rates in retail space, um, and it'll take a while because there are very good shopping centre owner managers out there and superannuation funds and so forth that own the shopping centres that are reluctant to reduce the rents.
Mm.
But I think over time there might be a little bit of rent reduction going on through the whole system.
Yes, I think that's long overdue anyway,
That's right.
even before this situation. So,
Well, for years, with retailers in shopping centres in particular, the percentage that rent has been making up as a percentage of the turnover has been increasing, and that's got to change because the retailers just haven't been making enough profit, and you're seeing what you're seeing from that in terms of business sales is that businesses, retail businesses in shopping centres, and whether they're franchise or not, but even more particularly so franchise in some areas, have become harder to sell because of virtual lease liabilities. If they sign up for long-term leases, that's good in terms of security, but it's also a risk in terms of if it all goes a bit pear-shaped, I've got a big lease liability here as well.
yeah, yeah. And I know some of the shopping centres where I was looking at some businesses that wanted to sell, their actual rent, their rent went up if their turnover went over a certain amount.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, I
know?
mean that's the sort of that's not necessarily a negative thing because that's what used to be called a turnover rent, where you reach a break-even point on the turnover, um, then there's a potential rent increase, or you pay more rent in that year. Um, so that can mean that you're only paying more rent if you're making more revenue. Um, it's probably the opposite of that is the bigger problem, where some of the retail shops, their revenue's gone down by 25% and they're still paying the same base rent. That's actually the bigger problem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. Just going back to the valuations again, I know you do a lot of valuations, or you do some valuations, um, for like legal situations where there's been a partnership split, or a marriage breakup or things like that. So it becomes a legal valuation requirement,
Sure.
and it needs to be a valuation done on a certain date or things like that. How are you going to handle that now?
Yeah, essentially, both valuing and appraising a business in the current marketplace has become more difficult, and it requires more analysis of accounts to see what the normal profit will be, or the future maintainable earnings. And when you've got a specific data valuation, in some cases you've got to take down, if that's during the middle of a shutdown, or it's during there's still some hospitality businesses that can't, due to social distancing, can't fully have as many patrons in as they would normally. So if you're valuing a specific data valuation, you've got to take into account an effective purchaser at that data valuation. And sometimes that means that that purchaser is going to have to wear the loss in profit up until the situation becomes normalised. And so if the prediction is it's not going to be normalised for 3 months, then in that time you're going to be $50,000 per month below normal revenue, then your value based on normal business value, but less $150,000 or 3 months times $50,000 to give you what the current value of the business is, knowing that the purchaser's got to take on that period of reduced trade. And that's the rough estimate of doing it. I mean, if the money becomes bigger in terms of and the periods become longer, then you should also be applying it sort of a present value of the loss of that revenue to get the time value of money included in that calculation as well. But that's the rough technique as to how you should be doing that.
Okay. So yeah, it's a whole new world, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it also, and added to that, there's got to be an awareness that going forward, the normal market terms could quickly become that vendor term type scenario. So market value may now or soon in the future be more about not just 100% of payment on settlement.
Yeah. So what's selling at the moment and what's really difficult to sell at the moment?
Yeah, so quality businesses are actually getting good demand. Anything that's online retail, online retail is consistently gaining market share. Anything that's health related and cleaning products and that sort of thing, it's probably an argument that some of those businesses, that may not be just short term. For some businesses, it might be, but who knows? Maybe we're going to wash our hands more for a fair period going forward.
Buy us hand sanitizer business.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's also a lot of the businesses that were even before COVID hit were already selling well. A lot of that hasn't changed, and that's that consistent recurring revenue type business. Like accountancy practices and a range of healthcare practices. Even technology businesses, IT support businesses, where particularly the ones who've got a lot of their customers on subscription revenue. So those are the sort of businesses that and I think also anything that's selling non-discretionary spend products. So whether that be supermarkets, liquor stores. I mean, when you go into recession, people drink more, so your liquor stores will probably go all right. So your non-discretionary spend is good.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, it's pretty obvious some of the ones that people won't be finding attractive. Last time we had a conversation, you talked about gym equipment businesses. And the fact that they sold out when the lockdown came on, but then a lot of the gyms had to give their equipment back because they were on lease.
That's right. So the price of hiring or buying gym equipment sort of doubled and then halved all within 4 weeks. But once again, that's all short-term sugar hit stuff. One of the things in terms of business values, though, is that there is emanating from Victoria. There's actually a fear of buying some of those businesses that shut down, like and talking about beauty salons, talking about gyms, that sort of business. Those sort of businesses had a heavy impact because people can see it happening in Victoria. That the brokers online I was talking to you about before, they've all been saying that that fear is actually spread to other states like South Australia and Western Australia, etc. That even though that situation isn't here, the purchasers are very, very well aware that how quickly that could change. And so there is a bit of a fear, which is restricting the sale of, your beauty salons and your gyms and that sort of thing, even though at the moment they're operating fine.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, it's interesting how we watch what happens over east, and then it's sort of, yeah, we anticipate the same thing happening here, but there's always that bit of a lag. What tips would you have for people at the moment who are, thinking of selling over the next 12 months, 2 years? Any tips for things that they could do?
Yeah, I think there's some strong tips in the marketplace in relation to that. Firstly, it's not necessarily a bad time to sell for a lot of businesses. I mean, I mentioned before that the listings are down 15 to 20%. There's coming into the marketplace. There's already coming into the marketplace people who have lost their job, looking to buy a small business. Now that starts with probably businesses worth only a couple of $100,000 or less, that sort of thing. But over in the eastern states, they're already seeing businesses up to $1 million being bought on that basis. And the reason for that is that some people who lost jobs have had high paying jobs, and they might have been earning $250,000, $300,000 a year, and their lifestyle needs that. And so they're trying to replace that. They're trying to replace that income to support their lifestyle. So don't immediately think, as a business owner, if you're thinking about selling, don't immediately think that this is a bad time to sell. That may not necessarily be the case. And I think, talk to your broker, get advice from your business coach, and your business might be one that is a good business to sell at the moment. I mean, as I say, good businesses with strong recurring revenue in the segments like online, etc., that are going well, you might have been getting stronger values now than what you were in the past.
Yeah.
I think the other thing though is that there's got to be a willingness from vendors, if they want to get their full market value now, to get your head around some vendor terms, whether it be just a simple 80% up front and 20% retention. And quite often the brokers will set that up so that the 20 or 30% retention is held in trust anyway. So it's not, and if you're confident your business turnover is going to remain, then, you got to understand from a buyer's perspective that they're not as confident as what vendors are. And, there's more fear now. And so, if you want to get the full value for your business, be willing to look at the vendor term scenario but I think also get professional advice to set it up, because you want those conditions and clauses in relation to that to be very, very strong, so that there's no dispute.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things you talked about when we last spoke was the business owner should document and record everything so that it's explainable. Yeah,
we're now getting to the period where, in Western Australia, a lot of that shutdown period is over, and it's right now. It's only not a very long period of time ago, so everyone can kind of remember. But 6 months down the track, 12 months down the track, when people are looking at past trading figures, trying to remember what the impact of COVID was on your particular business. It's great to have that documented clearly, because if you can show them quite clearly, this is when our business had to shut down, or this is when the impact of COVID hit us, and this is when it finished, and you're able to document that, it's going to give a purchaser a lot more confidence to excise that from the considerations and say, well, fair enough, you've documented that well, I'm confident in that information, so I'm willing to accept that. So documentation of that is very, very important.
I mean, it's always been the case that you should record everything anyway and document it, but even more critical in the circumstances we're in now. So that's good. So I think we've pretty well covered most things. There was an interesting article that I know you and I both read this week about an innovative way of...
That was great.
The coffee caravan business in Queensland, where the owner's actually running a raffle to sell it. I've never seen anything like that before. I don't know if you have.
Well, I think what a great idea. What a great idea. And it was in a remote town, wasn't it, John? It was,
Yeah.
in a remote town that, um, you know,
Yeppoon or something. Yeppoon.
yeah, your
Yeah.
plume where you're going to be pretty unsure of who the purchasers are going to be and what the market price is going to be and that sort of thing. And it's I thought it was a great story and a very innovative way of trying to sell a business. I'm not sure it's going to become commonplace, but I think in the end, I think doing the numbers, it was only a business that was going to be worth maybe up to $100,000 or something like that, and the sales of the raffle tickets were pretty much going to get to that level anyway by what they'd budgeted. So
Yeah.
it sounded like a win-win situation. Someone gets a business for whatever the price of the raffle ticket was, and yet
They're selling the tickets for $50,
yeah,
and you did get something for that. You got a painting of the actual coffee caravan sort of thing, so you actually got something for your $50, but
yeah.
that put you into the raffle. And the owner was hoping to sell 1,900 of these, which would have made her $95,000. And somebody gets a business for $50.
Well, the best deals in business are win-win deals, and that sounds like a win-win deal to me.
Me too. So, well, I just love people who come up with these crazy ideas. Well, not so much crazy, but out of the box ideas.
Yeah, yeah. No, 100%, 100%.
Yeah. So, Chris, your latest Business Values newsletter's out now. So, how can people go about getting that, and how can they go about contacting you if they want a valuation done?
Yeah, well, I think if people just look, they either want to subscribe to the newsletter or they just want to get some information on business values. If they Google Jarrott, that's Jarot, business valuations, and get onto our website. You can subscribe to the newsletter, or you can just look around the website and have there's a fair bit of information about business values in general and articles on business valuation and current market, what's happening in the market, that sort of thing. So you can get on the website and then they can subscribe to the newsletter if that's of interest to them, and also there's the contact details on the website if they need to get a business valuation done for a specific reason.
Fantastic. So they can get your email address and contact details off the website.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, terrific. And I highly recommend people do that. Go and have a look at the website. And yeah, if you're in the game of selling businesses or buying businesses, or you're looking to do that, then subscribe to the newsletter. It's full of great information every quarter. So well done on that, Chris. And thank you again for your time and coming on. And maybe we do this again in another 3 or 4 months and see what's happening then.
It's always a pleasure, John. It's always a pleasure to just to get a feel for what's going on in the business valuation market, and also to get some contact with yourself and all of the business owners that are in your fraternity as well. So it's always good to have a chat.
Thank you. And if anybody listening or watching is looking for some help on getting their business ready for sale, then you can contact me. That's john@johndenton.com.au. And you can go to the website, johndenton.com.au, to find out more information on the services that I offer. So there you have it, some very interesting developments as a result of the pandemic and business valuations becoming a little bit more complicated. But it's interesting that there's still good demand out there, and brokers I'm talking to are still telling me that they're seeing good demand for good businesses at the higher end of the range, not so much at the bottom end of the market, where they're more vulnerable, I guess, to change and things happening on a short-term basis. And the other point that Chris made was that if you've got finance, then you're in a very strong position as a buyer, because it's still very difficult to borrow money to buy businesses, and there's more and more demand coming into the market now for the vendor to provide finance. But if you do have your own finance available as a buyer, then you're going to be in a very strong negotiating position. So that's it for another podcast. I'm sure we'll be hearing from Chris again further down the track to see what's going on. But in the meantime, if you need any help getting your business ready for sale, or if you'd like an appraisal to see if it's saleable, then you can contact me, John, at johndenton.com.au, or via my website, johndenton.com.au. So until the next time, bye for now.